Okay, you guys, today we get to do a Q&A for you if you are confused, not concerned about where we get our questions. If you're concerned, we get them from you. So that might be concerning. If you're confused about where we get our questions, since we aren't on Instagram, we have a question box that we link down below in each episode, and you guys can ask your questions there, give podcast recommendations. We love how this allows us to hear more context in your questions instead of just a little blurb in a question box, and it helps us get to know you guys better, and it's a really fun way to have some kind of dialogue going back and forth with you guys. So if you enjoy this episode, give it a thumbs up. We're looking forward to doing it, and we will see you guys on the other side of the intro.
The Now That We're a Family podcast.
Well, here we are once again, Katie, coming off the race of Classical Conversations Community Day. We probably should just make this the How'd Class Go segment for you. Was it a good day at class?
It was so much fun. You guys know I've wanted to be a teacher, and I've been able to teach my own children, and I've been able to teach home management online. But it's really fun to do this in a classroom setting. And this morning I got up at 5 a.m. to draw the Greek and Roman gods. So it's a fun creative outlet for me. I really enjoy it, and I enjoy seeing the kids get all excited. So
You're
it's
drawing
been a lot
them,
more fulfilling than I thought.
Yeah. You drew them by hand because I failed in giving us enough time to get to the print shop last night.
No, it was more fun that way anyways. The kids are pretty impressed by my drawing skills.
Is that right?
So,
That went over well?
Oh, yeah.
Good. I'm not surprised.
It was more fun. You set me up for success on that one.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay, well, this time that we're turning the tables, I feel like the last Q&A, you asked all the questions, and I hadn't heard of any of them, and now
That's
we're
true.
going vice versa. And most of these are kind of directed towards you, so it's very fitting. And this says, Katie, with being the firstborn girl, did you ever struggle with butting heads with your mom? My firstborn 7-year-old daughter has a sweet, helpful heart, but struggles often with trying to be in charge and talking back to me. I want to help her become a leader, but also want her to learn submission and humility. Any practical thoughts on how to do this in a loving way that doesn't squelch our relationship? How did your mom react to this?
Those are all really great questions. And I do think it's inevitable that you're going to maybe butt heads with all your children at some point. You're the authority in their life, and so they're going to be butting up against that authority fence that God has placed as a protection around them, and they're going to see where that boundary is. And so I think that regardless of personality or gender or all those things, your kids are probably going to go through that. But I was what people term as a strong-willed child, meaning I had an opinion of my own, and like Charlotte Mason says, probably rather a weak will, and I didn't control it very well. And I absolutely butted heads with my mom, I butted heads with my dad, and I always appreciated them and loved them, but it was a good day I didn't get a spanking until I was like 8 years old. And that was because I did push the boundaries. And I think that there's several personality types in my family. You know, my mom and dad raised 8 girls, and probably every 2 or 3 of us, there's one that's really challenged my mom and been bossy or, just fought for that like alpha female, I don't know what you say, like role, whether it's in the kitchen. Some of my sisters are more territorial in the kitchen, and my mom's like, hey, this is my kitchen. She is so gracious. Or just different opinions. And I'm forgetting the whole question, but I think just working for a relationship with your daughter is going to well pay off. I will let you know this. I was way closer to my dad growing up. To me, my mom represented the authority and the discipline, and she made me do my school. She made me do my chores. She was no fun in my brain compared to my dad, who got to come in and do the surprises and give us sugar when we, weren't going to have it that night, and he just did all the fun stuff. And then I got married, and my mom was like, I realized she was my best friend, and I didn't know that up until that point.
Wow.
And now I'm just incredibly grateful for that relationship with my mom. And I was always grateful for my mother, but like we weren't besties growing up. So I think that you can still have that really close relationship with your adult daughter, even if you kind of have to make her toe the line for years.
Wow. Yeah, boy, that's actually crazy to think about, because I'm sure that's a common experience with stay-at-home moms, with homeschool mothers, where they are the one in the day in and day out establishing the boundaries, enforcing rules, and the children only see them, or they see them primarily in that light, the enforcer of rules, like the joy kill or whatever. And then the dad can come in and be the fun, loving, adventure and like party guy. And excuse me, I think it's incumbent upon the fathers to speak well of their wife, to set them up for success, so the children can see the fun in the mother. And I do think sometimes, I know that this was the case with my parents. My mom was such a fun, hardworking, driven woman, but my dad would also, I feel like, have to draw that out of her too, if that makes sense, because the mothers are they're in the day in and day out grind, the stay-at-home mothers. I think it probably is easier for them to just have a heavier countenance than maybe the husbands that are coming home. Again, it's personality, yeah, but I'm just wondering if that's a theme. And so I do think, mothers can probably make a way to, be fun loving, and then the husbands, I think, can do better at drawing out that fun loving part of the mother. But that's powerful to hear how you didn't view your mother as a friend until you were married, and it makes you grateful that your mother and you didn't do anything damaging in those combative years, right? In those, this happens oftentimes in the adolescent or teen years. Mean things are said that can really have long-term ramifications on the relationship between a father and a son, a father and a daughter, a mother and a son, a mother and a daughter. And so it's really powerful to hear how, even though it wasn't this fun, loving besties situation, there was still a healthy relationship there that you could then make more carefree and fun and reciprocal.
Yeah, and it's funny looking back, because I thought I was so much like my dad. But since getting married too, I realized, I think a lot of the reason why my mother and I would butt heads was because we are actually very, very similar. And I am so grateful for that. If I could be a carbon copy of my mother, I would. I would opt for that. She has so many strengths in areas that I would like to have strengths in, and I'm not. I don't have all of her strengths. But there were funny things, like growing up, she'd be like, "Oh, you're so impatient. You get that from me." And now that I'm a mom, I look back and I'm like, my mom was so patient. She had all of us to deal with all the time. And she was really fun loving. And there are moments of I remember her, we turn on funny music and she just surprised us busting out all these dance moves. And we're like, where did that come from? But she did have to be so disciplined and practical on the day in and day out. And, I think something that I would encourage is Mommy was very intentional to keep an open line of communication with each one of us girls. I did feel like I could talk to her about anything, even if it was awkward or uncomfortable. I did still feel I could come to her and I would be loved, or I would be forgiven, or whatever the case may be. And so I think that's really important during those times. And she did things to encourage that, like doing our Fair Maidens Bible study. That went on for years, on and off, where she would get us girls together and we would have tea and go through a book together and just talk about different things that got brought up in the book. And so she was very intentional in maintaining those relationships and those lines of communication. And so I guess the relationship was ripe for when we weren't living in the same house anymore to have a good relationship, because she had laid the foundation over all those years and I didn't even realize it.
Yeah, that's so good to consider as a parent. Do we not get the full payoff for doing the right thing, until later? I mean, a lot of times it's an eternal reward. You don't get it until eternity. But you think of even that timeline, parents pouring into their children, and it being more or less a thankless job, where you're pouring in, creating an environment where they can thrive. And I'm sure it is really satisfying as a parent to then have an adult child that truly does show that appreciation. You think of the Proverbs 31 woman, it is the children that rise up and call her blessed. And I really envision those being adult children. When you look at all that lady's done in her life and her husband is standing in the gate, you're like, okay, I think her children are adult children. And they're rising up and calling her blessed. And I love how you pointed this out in Proverbs 31. It's her children that rise up and call her blessed because they were the ones that had the front row seat to all the hard work she was doing. And that is such a distinguishing factor between somebody whose heart is towards the home and towards her children, and somebody whose heart is elsewhere, is outside of the home. It's her children that rise up and call her blessed when they are adults, versus others rising up and calling her excellent or great or powerful. And like, what a testimony that is the this thing that I think Proverbs illustrates as being this thing to aspire to. And it's your adult children that are going to rise up and call you blessed. And that's going to happen because of all that faithful work that in those child training years, those young years, they weren't probably rising up and calling you blessed then, right? It was probably pretty thankless. But that is the case now with my mother and with your mother. We get together as a family, and all my siblings now, like, the one thing that this is actually kind of cool. The one time that we know we're all together is my mother's birthday now. Because even, Thanksgiving, Christmas, so many siblings are married, and they'll, split the holidays, right? You go back and forth. But my mother's birthday, like once a year, a lot of them live real close by, but even if they didn't, my brother lives in Arizona. He makes the effort. I definitely will make the effort. It's like, I'm going to be there for my mother's birthday because I think we want to bless her and we want to rise up and call her blessed as adult children.
Yeah, and I love that adult child, that mindset, because I think we want our kids to like us when they're young, and we want to have fun with them, and we are laying the foundation for a relationship. But and I do think that we can have the foresight of, feeling like, okay, this is going to hurt our relationship later in life. I don't want something, like you said, like saying words that a child never forgets and repeats over and over to themselves, or something like that. And, something for me that was that way was actually social media. And I know it's not that way for everybody, but there really came a time in life when we were vlogging and sharing our lives and stuff where I felt like, okay, people right now that I don't know are rising up and calling me blessed. And I'm pretty sure that if I continue this route, when we continue this route, our kids won't.
Wow.
And it's like, that is so not worth it. I would rather live a life where only the kids know.
Right. Exactly.
Instead of everybody else saying, because I think really often this flips, where everyone else thinks, wow, she was such a great mom, or wow, he was such a great dad. And then the kids are adults and are like, you have no idea.
Right.
And I just never want that in our home. So anyways.
You're right. Because it's the opposite, I feel like, in how you speak about your mother. And it's certainly how me and my siblings feel about our mother is, and I remember thinking this even before I got married and grew in great appreciation for my mother, and before I became a young adult. I remember even at 15, 16, 17, already having a real appreciation for my mother, and thinking, because we would go and perform, and my mother would sing. She's a great vocalist, and she was praised by the audience. But it was different when we would hear her praised by the audience there, because I think deep down we were kind of like, well, no, like, yeah, that is awesome that she can sing.
But
and
you
that
have no idea.
But
yeah.
you have no idea. Like, it's actually so much better than that. Like, her greatest work is directed, it's behind closed walls, directed towards us. Like, you don't get her best work. Like, we receive that as children, and I've only realized that more and more as I've gotten older, where you look back, and it's weird now being in my 30s, because I have memories of my parents in their 30s, and you're like, whoa, they were so, like, I think about how torn my brain can be with outside opportunities or with hobbies or just various interests, and how much effort it really does take me to keep my heart directed towards my children. I like my children, but there's just distractions, right? I love my children. I have a blast with them. And how my parents were so faithful in doing that. It's really, I only grow in appreciation of my mother and of my parents as I get older. You don't have to wait until November to vote. You can vote every day with your dollar. At GoodRanchers.com, you can make a powerful choice to vote for American meat, support American agriculture, and make your voice heard for transparency in our food. Good Rancher. Oh, okay, dang it. I tell you what, one of these days I'm going to get through an entire read without sounding like a moron. But today's not that day. Good Ranchers sources all their meat exclusively from American farms, which not only supports local ranchers, but also ensures that you receive high-quality American-raised meat with no antibiotics, no added hormones, or seed oils ever. By shopping from GoodRanchers.com, you're making a statement about the kind of values you stand for. Values of quality, hard work, and dedication to American tradition. And right now, Good Ranchers is having a presidential promo. For a limited time, you can get a free add-on for a whole 4 years until the next election. That means when you subscribe to any of their boxes, you get to decide if you want extra plain chicken breasts, Angus ground beef, Applewood smoked bacon, or wild-caught salmon in every order for 4 years. It's the perfect way to ensure you always have high-quality American meat in your kitchen. Every cut is pre-trimmed, individually packed, and vacuum sealed, which makes your life easier. No more messy meal prep and no more wasted food because of freezer burn or poor store packaging. Good Ranchers helps you get the most flavor and value out of every ounce of meat you buy. And in this economy, that matters more each day. Don't miss out. Use my code Voetberg. It's really our code. Our code Voetberg to claim this presidential promo worth over $1,200 and bring 100% American meat to your family meals until 2028. GoodRanchers.com. American meat delivered. Next question.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Here's another one. I had it. Let's see here. Katie, this is another one for you.
Okay.
With moving so often as a child, do you find it difficult to be content staying in one place?
That's funny. That's a great question. So when Elisha and I first got married, I definitely felt the itch to move every few months. I'd like to bring up different ideas, and Elisha was great at dreaming and brainstorming with me, and we would always throw out all these ideas and then come back to, no, it's just like itchy feet. We need to stay where we're at, and this is best for us. But I will say, when I got married, I really didn't want to move a lot. And so far that's been true of all my sisters that have gotten married, is we all got married and just wanted to settle. And yes, you want to move to maybe be closer to family, or, you see a couple moves being in your life, but none of us, to my knowledge, wanted to continue the fast-paced moving. And we all felt a lot more peace marrying guys that weren't going to just pick up and move. That was my dad's very adventurous bent, and it was an adventure, but there's something just so settling being in one place. So like where we're living now, I have no desire to ever go anywhere else. And I think that sometimes if I feel that itch to change something, I do feel the itch to change. I like change. You change something smaller instead of a move or a job change or something like that. Change the way you're doing something, change
the decoration.
Routine, exactly. Change the home, redecorate, stuff like that. Like I'll get the itch to do stuff like that. Or even go on a trip somewhere and experience a new culture of, even if it's within the contiguous United States.
Yeah, go from Idaho to Washington. Get that.
Like,
shock.
Okay, go to Southern California or go to the East Coast or something like that. But so I think I do scratch that itch for change in different ways, but it has been very settling. And one of the biggest blessings of marrying Elisha is even when I early on thought that a change should be a move, his wisdom and just being like, I don't think that's actually the change we're looking for here. And over time, that itch has completely gone away. And I'm just, very settled and grateful for roots. I think something I really would like to give our children is what Elisha's family has in terms of a home to go back to. Like, I love how his parents, their home's on the hill, and you always know it's going to be on the hill. And I would like that for my kids and grandkids to be able to visit and come back. And then I also feel like I have my parents' side of like, I want to travel more and I want to, take our kids around to different things, but not necessarily like totally relocating. So.
Yeah, I know that was something that I considered, and I think we talked a little bit about it prior to marriage, because I grew up, like, as you already said, very different, where I grew up in the same home my entire, childhood and into my young adult years. And when you and I started dating, this was, and I know that this was much of your childhood and your young adult life, but what I thought you were going to want and expect was similar to the years how your guys' life looked the years leading up to our marriage. And that was like, yeah, you guys had a home at that point, but you would spend 5 months out of the year there. And you were spending, time 6 weeks at Tahoe skiing, 6 weeks, on the coast of California somewhere, surfing. You guys are doing long trips to the East Coast. You were gone a lot for extended periods of time, and you guys are such positive people. You would always talk. Those were the conversations you and I would have, right? Because when we were talking and dating, that's the life you were living, and so you always brought it up in such a positive light. And so I just assumed you would want to continue that to some capacity when we got married, and that really did have an effect even on what we chose to do business-wise. We're like, okay, are we building something that will give us the freedom to travel and to go various places? And so it was surprising to me when I think we both realized, like, we actually don't want this. Like, we don't want to spend a few months here, a few months there, half the year here, half the year there. Like, we love a home, and we love going to church every Sunday. We love having a community group that we see on a regular basis. We love routine. We love going on the same walks as a family, having our favorite coffee shops to go to. Now that we have a property, I think we really love envisioning how to build this property out and to spend years of hard work and pleasure here. And that's been kind of fun. Both of us, I feel like, being on that journey together. We're grateful, I think, that we built the businesses in the way that we built them. But I like working Monday through Friday at a specific location. Like, that's our life now. We built this theoretical.
We thought we wanted this entrepreneurial freedom life.
Yes.
And then when people want to get together midweek, we're like, well, our weekend's open.
Yes.
We have such a it's just funny.
Well,
compared
even
to what we thought we wanted.
We thought this is great because now we can ski on Tuesdays or Wednesdays when it's not busy. We don't have to wait, in line. And same with going to the local theme park or going to the state park here, going on hikes. It's we just like doing work and school Monday through Friday, and then we go do those things when everybody else does them, even though technically we could go, when it's probably cheaper or there's shorter lines.
Yeah, we don't like doing things when we feel other people are working. It's not very restful for us. And I think some entrepreneurs are really good at feeling that oh, we get to do this because everyone else is in school or everybody else is at their job or something. And Elisha and I both just feel the whole time people are working, man. What are we doing here?
Yeah.
So, because when Elisha and I first got married, I don't know what you thought, but you probably thought that my life sounded pretty interesting too.
Oh,
sure. A little bit, wanting to pursue that a little bit more. So we would go down to California. We had no money. I don't even know how we did this. And we'd rent these little cracker boxes down in San Clemente our first couple years of marriage and think, okay, we're going to go down for 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And then we started realizing, wow, we're really productive in January when we don't go anywhere, And
right,
so
when we stay home.
It's not saying that our winters are long up here, and it's not saying we won't ever try to go somewhere else. Looking at our life, I was telling Elisha, it looks like we have some kind of crisis where we have to move into a strange living situation every few years. Because we did the trailer and we're like, okay, never doing that again. And then 5 years later, we're out here in a tent. So I'm I don't know, maybe in 5 years,
what are we going to do?
We throw around random ideas.
What's it going to be?
But it's not leaving the property, I guess. So it's not selling the property. It's if we could hold on to a forever home and be able to go have a unique living experience, then that's cool. If we aren't, then we would rather opt for sticking it out long term with one piece of land. I think we're on the same page. But we throw around random ideas of oh, we could go here for a few months or we could live here for a year. And so I'm not saying that that's not in our future, because I do think we like shaking things up a bit too.
Yeah. And I will say this about, because how many times did you move before we got married?
21 times. I got married at 21.
Nice.
And I moved 21 times.
That's great. And something that I think has been a huge blessing is that anytime we move anywhere, you immediately make that place home. Like you really put forth extra effort to decorate, to get, nice plates to eat on. Like nothing ever feels temporary when I'm with you, when we're going places. And that caught me off guard from the beginning, because I think the first apartment that I rented that we, came back from our honeymoon to, I had in my brain, like, we'll be here a few months. I think it was a 6-month agreement. So I thought, yeah, this is a good spot for the next 6 months, but we'll find a better living situation after that. And I had such a temporary mindset with that space where I was like, no, do not, like, just get the cheapest free furniture we can find. Let's just eat off paper plates. And it was a very, like, what do you call that? Like, nomadic approach to living in an apartment. And you had the opposite. You're like, I'm going to paint this thing. Like, can you ask the landlord if I can paint it? Like, let's match this furniture, to the walls. Like, let's actually get of an environment going here that we enjoy being in. And boy, was I grateful for that, because we ended up being there, 3.5 years, 4 years. And it was such a cozy place because of the extra effort you put into it.
Well, what's funny is that we've kind of grown in this way, and it's become actually like a mantra of our family, because you came up with that concept of being your dream home. And Elisha, this concept has been really eye-opening for me, because maybe I'd move in and I'd paint right away or do something to make it feel at home right away, but I'd still have those gaps in my thinking of like, but I'm going to wait until we get to the place where we have, a nice homeschool room to start a routine, or to the place where we have a big backyard before we go outside, or things like that. And Elisha really changed my perspective on, no, a place isn't going to change who we are. So how can we be our ideal right here in this place? And that's become a big perspective that we see everything through now. And so whether it's in a tent or if it's in a suburb or where we've been, just those have been our last 2 moves. I feel like I really appreciate your perspective on that. And it's a place you really just dig in and are like, okay, if something's not working, how do we make this work right now in this season, instead of feeling in transition and always waiting for something bigger, better, more stable.
Well, you've reminded me of that so recently, because we went through the transition of selling our home, moving into the tent, and there was the need for new routines and for just figuring out life out here. And I didn't even realize how many compromises I had made in my brain when it came to what I knew was my ideal flow for life, as far as my personal Bible times, family reading times, which we quickly put back into place, even meal times, and then working out and fitness. Like it was crazy how I kept putting these things off, because it's like, well, we're living in a tent like that. We're not going to, get my workout routine going, or like I had stopped jiu-jitsu, and it was 4 weeks ago now that you're the one that was just kind of like, well, like, you want to get back to jiu-jitsu, what are you waiting for? And in my brain I was like, I'm not going to train jiu-jitsu while I'm living in a tent. And it's like, why not? And that was helpful. Like that gave a structure and routine, and just gave me that footing to be like, that's right, a place is a place, but we have so much control over who we're being, regardless of what the environment is. And so even though, you give me credit for coming up with that concept, it's like you're the one that brings us, you remind us of that often. It's like, well, let's be our dream home here, right? Let's not wait for it. Let's not wait to build it or to move to it. And so it is a helpful thing to constantly remind ourselves of.
Yeah, because you get caught in a trap.
Yes.
Very quickly, of a temporary mindset. And I think that, nothing's ever temporary. Your home is always your home.
Everything's temporary.
In terms of,
sorry, I cut you off. Maybe I was like,
you're right.
I wasn't willing to work with you on that one.
It's always wrong. But I guess when it comes to temporary, like our children's childhood is right now. The sights and smells of home is right now.
Yeah.
That's not temporary. That is a permanent place in their brain, in a core memory of what is home to me. And so,
whoa, that's sobering, Katie.
Yeah.
Whoa.
It really is.
I shouldn't have cut you off, because that was really good.
And I'm not saying there aren't hard seasons, and I don't want people to feel bad in transitionary seasons where you're like, I am just like floundering, because that was me this summer. It was really like trying to get our feet under us, Elisha and I, trying to figure out what was new, and some stuff was clicking and some stuff wasn't. But I guess,
Yeah, that's so good to hear. It's sobering. And it is also nice, like you said, children also have a powerful way to like have to rebound quickly, right? To if it is a bad day or you snap at them, they're so quick to they want to be reconciled to you and they want that relationship to be restored and so you can like reset the aroma of the home, I feel like, very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly.
Yeah.
Exactly. They can forget a bad 3 weeks.
Yes.
If you have a good 3 months of, that gets
I think if you have
seared
a
in
good
their
3 days,
mind.
honestly.
I did hear something that I thought was so good, and we brought this up before maybe, but it was, if you don't do it during the week, I think we heard it from Jeremy Pryor, if you don't do it within 7 days, it's not a part of your family identity or family culture. And so I think that there's that. I think that if we're consistent enough to do something within 7 days, that's doing a family Bible time or family singing time or
Family walk or whatever.
Family walk,
Yeah.
exactly. Like whatever your core values for your families are, hospitality, those are going to be what kids remember if they're done on at least within a 7-day time period. So it's like, we don't have to be perfectionists and hit every single day. But we also can't go months and say, this is our family identity
Right.
or our family culture and never do it, because no one's going to know it was our family culture except for the piece of paper that,
Yeah.
we wrote it on.
I do like that concept of the 7-day rhythm because we're huge fans of not being in the gap and measuring backwards and tracking progress, right? If instead of looking at your imperfection and all the days you missed working out, you go like, well, hey, like you set that huge goal and you didn't hit the goal, but look at all the progress you made because you set the goal. But I like even another layer, another filter of being honest with yourself, right? Because you can't say like, well, hey, I set this goal 3 months ago. I didn't hit it, but I did work out twice over the last 3 months. And you're like, well, you can't really say that's like a part of your identity or your culture now, right? Or the same thing with our homes. Be like, yeah, we set out this year in 2024 to have to do family singing times, and we've done it twice. You're like, I mean, that's great that you did it twice, but it's not really becoming a core value of the home or a part of your identity. But if you're like, hey, you know what, we can do it once a week, that's something that can kind of keep you in that rhythm. And then, like you said, it becomes a part of your family identity. Okay, next question. What pastors / resources do you most learn from other than the pastor from your church?
That's great. We got this question. I don't even think our episode that we just talked about the pastor from our church so much on has gone up yet.
You're right. We
That's
a
did
good
an
point.
episode with talking so much about our pastor because we do really appreciate him. Elisha, what would you say? I feel like you listen to more people than I do, but I'll think of it.
Yeah, I mean,
I do have great
we've mentioned
resources.
these before, and it's been a little different being out here in the woods because I'm on my computer less, and so my go-to podcasts I feel like are some of the Canon Plus podcasts. So the Doug and Friends when they do that, or the Stories Are Soul Food. I really enjoy the this isn't from Canon Plus, it's different. The Remnant Radio podcast, that's one that I stay pretty consistent on. And then as far as pastors and sermons, it's funny because I don't do a lot of sermons. Occasionally, I will go and I'll listen to maybe like a Jeff Durbin sermon if it's topical, like Apologia Church, and they have great resources as well. I will, if he's doing a sermon on the sanctity of life, because they are so active in, preserving human life and really fighting the pro-choice movement. They're abolitionists in when it comes to abortion, and they're doing such good work there. So I like topical sermons that guys like him will do, so I enjoy that. And then books. We've talked about this a lot. We're reading books a lot, so I've mentioned C.R. Wiley. He's been in my head a lot via his books. Actually, I do listen to his podcast from time to time. It's called The Pugcast, so that's fun. I like his podcast. So those are a few that I think of. But yeah, our pastor is probably the most consistent voice, because we're spending our time in God's Word. We talk to each other. And then I'd say our pastor is the primary voice, because even not just his sermons, which we appreciate, but then our Tuesday night small group discusses the sermon as well. And so obviously it's always, based on a passage of Scripture that we're covering. But we'll break down kind of the points that he drew out from these various passages of Scripture.
Yeah, I would just real quickly add that I think that, so out here in the tent, it's not feasible for me to listen to podcasts because I can't like just set up my laptop, it overheats. I'm trying to listen to podcasts and stuff. So it's been primarily like in person. I've been really blessed to have a lot of in-person friends that go to our home group that I feel like I'm learning from. A lot of women that are ahead of me that are just really wise. And then books. And I mentioned Emily Barnes. I love her stuff. I've enjoyed, I'm trying to think who else. What's her name? Merkel? What is that Teach Them to Work book?
I think that was Beakey, right?
Beakey.
Yes, it was, I think, Joel
Mary
Beakey's,
Beakey?
I'm assuming it's Joel Beakey's wife.
Yes.
I think, yes.
So Mrs. Beakey.
Mrs. Beakey.
Love her stuff. I do love Canon Plus's podcast. Rachel Jonkovich is a kick. I have loved her documentaries and Rebecca Merkel's documentaries, as well as just some of the teaching stuff that they've done on Canon Plus. So I'd say like it's pretty simple right now. Also Autumn Kern with The Commonplace. Love her stuff for homeschooling. So I'd say that I'm keeping it pretty simple right now, but those are the voices that I would say. Again, I've never listened to sermons online or pastors or podcasts that way. I just never got into it. It was, I don't know. Like you said, I prefer like a topical teaching on a subject than maybe like a sermon.
Yes.
Just the way it's laid out it just doesn't feel right to me listening to it on a podcast.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I'm just kind of like, I like feel like I should be in a congregation or something.
Right.
So I'd say that's it.
That's good. Yeah, for whatever reason, I've phased, because I love hearing pastors and theologians like discuss things and have some sort of dialogue with someone else. It, like, that has really now taken precedence to like a sermon. So obviously I love our Sunday sermon, and I might listen to a second sermon throughout the week, but I'd way rather listen to, whoever. Like, because so when I go back to like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I would listen to hours and hours and hours of sermons. Like, I'd go back through John Piper's archive, on the Desiring God website, or Matt Chandler's, archive of sermons, or Tim Keller's. I just listened to hours and hours of sermons.
John MacArthur's also really
John MacArthur,
good.
exactly.
I do
Just
know that.
hours and hours of his sermons, or Alistair Begg, or who I listened to a ton of was he passed away, and then he was found guilty of all those like sexual misdeeds. Ravi Zacharias,
right.
Just listened to so much of him, and so I guess it's just this new form of communication now that I prefer. And so I still love, all those pastors, but I'd way rather hear them like in an interview context or in a discussion format. That's why I love the White Horse Inn. Dr. Michael Horton, I think, is a pastor at a church, but I discovered him through that kind of round table format of the White Horse Inn. And still love that podcast as well.
Yeah, so I think that's it for questions right now. We're going to wrap it up. But thank you guys so much for listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone you know. And we will see you guys in a few days.
Bye-bye.